Thank you. I'm really proud of my son Isaiah. It's not easy to get up here in front of you all as a 13-year-old. It's pretty amazing. And I'm also just proud of him as a sibling to Samuel, because every day I think inclusion happens sometimes most organically in the household, in the family. And sometimes I think about, when you have dinner together, do you all sit in one table except for the sibling that has a disability and they sit in a different table? That would seem completely absurd, but that's what we do in our schools sometimes and in our communities. Hopefully that is becoming less and less of a trend in our schools, but we have so much work to do. So what I want to talk about a little bit is first about why inclusion is so critical to think about as we reauthorize ESEA, as we move towards IDEA reauthorization, because I find I do a lot of talking around the country and internationally and showing the film. And I find the first thing is important to talk about why inclusion even matters, why it's critical, not just for kids with disabilities, but kids without disabilities, our entire society. I think first and foremost, we talk about academics. And I have so much respect for special educators, but their job is not to educate a child all day long in one classroom. Their job, I hope, is to make sure that child is receiving the general education experience, learning the general education curriculum with their peers. And when I think about what I hope for Samuel, it is that he is having the experience of academically being with his peers, but in some ways the social experience of being with his peers is even more critical. And I won't put you all on the spot, but often I ask this question to audiences that I speak with, and I say, when you think about what has made you a happy, successful person, whatever that means to you, whether it's your relationships, your friendships, your careers, is it because of the academic experience of school, or is it because of the social and emotional experience that you had in school? And I can tell you, 100% of the audiences, virtually 100% of the people say it's the social and emotional development that they experienced in school that made them who they are today primarily. Academics are important, but that social and emotional development is what helps you navigate the world. And when we think about what the experience is like for kids who are in separate or secluded environments versus kids who are in integrated general education environments, that social and emotional development happens in general education environments, because that's where you learn to navigate the world with people of all abilities. And that's not just for kids with disabilities, that is for the kids without disabilities, learning what it means to be patient and kind and collaborative of children of different abilities, just like they learn that with children of different ethnic backgrounds, children who speak different languages, kids of different gender, kids with different sexual orientation. All that is an experience you have in being in a general education environment. What it's done for Samuel is it's gotten his peers to know him not as the kid in the wheelchair, but as Samuel, their friend. So they're developing these organic friendships that Isaiah alluded to, that when Samuel comes home, every day, as Isaiah said, the kids pour into our household. And there's this natural friendships that are developing that will move up with him as he goes to middle school, an even more critical time to have a support network and a group of friends who will stand by you and who will be with you as you navigate the very complicated years of pre-adolescence. And I think also something we've seen happen with Samuel is because he's in the general education environment, he's developing a sense of curiosity, adventure, possibility that I don't think he would experience if he was in a secluded environment, a separate environment. So he's learned, they went through a unit on physics and he learned about rocket ships. Next thing we know, he was going to rocket ship camp. He just finished a fourth grade curriculum on raptors, and he started learning about hawks and turkey vultures and eagles. Suddenly he's become the most avid bird watcher in our lives, and has taught our family. Isaiah's still a little resistant to the bird watching thing. He'd rather watch the Red Sox, but understandably he'd rather watch a ball game. But I've become now an avid bird watcher because of Samuel. It's a wonderful thing. So none of that would happen without the experience and the exposure to the full range of academics. It's carried into his extracurricular involvement. So now when Samuel is in the theater program at school, he uses an augmented communication device. He has a Dynavox, which is an incredible device that's changed our lives and that allows him to speak thousands of words, control our television. Someday it'll help him open the doors to our house. He can instant message with it. He can go online. And there are other types of devices like this, but this device has been incredible for him. So when he's up on stage in theater, he's speaking his lines through augmented communication. And none of the kids blink an eye, because this is what they see in school every day. And when I see kids around town who stare at Samuel, who get upset by his drooling or his motions, I know that they don't go to an inclusive school. I can tell kids who go to inclusive schools just by the way they react to Samuel. And then just Saturday, Isaiah and I were there together. Samuel had a baseball game. He's the only kid who's ever played at this level in our town who uses a wheelchair. He plays in a kid pitch league, and One day we met with the league organizers and we said, Sam would like to play baseball at this level. We don't know what that's going to look like. We don't quite know how to do it, but he wants to play. And the league organizer said, if there's a 10-year-old that wants to play baseball in our community, he's going to play baseball, which was, wow, what a powerful message. So Sam was playing baseball on a bicycle, an adaptive bicycle. He hits off a tee, and then the ball's in play, and all hell breaks loose, and he does whatever needs to happen to get to first base. He pedals hard, and on Saturday, Samuel, he was up with first and third. He got a double on his first at bat, drove in the first run of the game. Then his second at bat, he got a single, stole second, drove in another run, right? Got half the RBIs in the game and got the game ball from the coach. It was unbelievable just a couple days ago. And so that's what's happened. And again, that's because of his experience in school. All the other kids are accepting of these accommodations he needs. I also think there's some protection against bullying, because as Samuel gets older and he goes up with this community that he's developed that is so strong in our elementary school, and he goes into the middle school years where bullying is much more likely, he's going to have a lot of kids who will stand up for him. And you know what? He's going to stand up for himself, because he's learning self-advocacy skills in being with his classmates all day long. But I think it is worth touching on the benefits to other children as well, because I frankly don't think it's a winning argument to just talk about kids with disabilities and why we should thread inclusion throughout ESEA Reauthorization just for kids with disabilities, although that in itself I think is very worthwhile. I think that children become more flexible, kind, and welcoming. And a quick story about our teacher, Ms. O'Brien, who taught Samuel K-1-2 grades, said there was a child from Burundi who came into her classroom. We've had a lot of refugee resettlement in central New Hampshire. And this child knew no English, knew nothing about the American culture, but the kids were incredibly welcoming to this child. They embraced this child. They used flexible communication techniques, hand gestures, eye language, to embrace this child into the classroom. And Mrs. O'Brien said that's because of Samuel. That's because what they've learned in terms of being flexible in the way that they interact, their patience, their communication. And then what happens when a child has a cousin born with a disability, or a nephew, or suddenly a grandparent develops Alzheimer's or has a stroke and is communicating or moving in different ways. They see this as part of the diversity of our society. They see this as just part of the reality of life. We will all acquire a disability. It's called aging. All of us will at some point. And that's what kids are learning, that this is part of our natural diversity. They also are learning about technology. Kids, the Dynavox is like a little puppy for Samuel. Kids love to come to him, and it's just like this magnet for interaction. So that type of technology is now saturated throughout our school system, and the kids embrace it. And again, I think the academic benefits come when you have peer teaching within a classroom. The best thing I love to see, and Samuel's teachers love to see, is when the kids are teaching each other. And there's a study being conducted right now, it's almost ready for publication at the University of Wisconsin, the Wiseman Center, that shows that when you have peer education in the classroom between kids with and without disabilities, the kids with disabilities, their achievement is off the charts, like 20, 30 points above through inclusive settings with peer education. But kids without disabilities, their achievement levels are going up as well, because they're more engaged in the curriculum. When you're teaching and coaching and working together with your peers, you become more engaged and your academic achievement goes up as well. So as Joe Petner says, I don't know if he says it in the trailer, I think he just says it in the full film, show us, test us on this. You will see that inclusive environments yield better academic results. Barbara O'Brien said to me one day, inclusion has forced me to be a better teacher. And that is because Barbara O'Brien, Samuel's teacher, never had any inclusion classes. She never studied inclusion. She's just a great teacher who's determined to reach every child in the classroom. And in having Samuel and other kids with disabilities in her classroom, she's learned to differentiate her instruction. She's learned to use techniques of universal design for learning and co-teaching and all the things that we see as kind of best practices that should be, and I hope will be, threaded throughout ESEA Reauthorization. The best practices that are shown by research to improve both student achievement and teacher preparation. And I think we're going to hear more about that later. So I'll conclude by just talking about, I was at NYU a few weeks ago and I was talking to education students, and they said, how can we be great inclusion teachers? What can you tell us? And I said, there's no class called Inclusion 101 that will make you a great inclusion teacher. What you need to study is the best practices in education, period, in general education. That includes universal design for learning. Many of you are familiar with that, but it's using technology and different curriculum that reaches learners of all styles, whether it's auditory or text or kinetic learners, whatever it is, to reach those styles of children where they can best learn. It's differentiated instruction, similar ideas. Again, I'm not going to try and give you a briefing on each of these. Positive behavioral supports is something I'm actually doing my whole next film about. Is looking at how schools can create very positive cultures and support kids with significant emotional behavioral challenges within the general education setting. And that's the film that I'm working on right now. Response to intervention, many of you know, an early literacy intervention program that's proven very successful. We heard from Alexa Posney this morning. I know she's making that a top priority in ESEA Reauthorization, and she plans and hopes to have that threaded throughout the reauthorization. And co-teaching, collaborative teaching between special educators and regular educators in the same classroom, working as a team rather than working in isolation in separate classrooms. So I think we're going to hear more about these approaches, but the important thing is that these approaches exist, they're proven, they're research-based, and they can be part of this new law if there's momentum for them and if there's consensus, which we're hoping to build today. So thank you very much.